Hello and welcome to my video lecture, or the video lecture, on functional dependencies and keys. You should have a fairly good idea of what keys are at this point. We've talked about primary keys, we've talked about foreign keys. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's known as functional dependency. In the text, functional dependency is a constraint between two attributes in which the value of one attribute is determined by the value of another attribute. In this slide, it's a little bit more concise in that we're talking about one attribute is going to be termed the determinant, determines the value of another attribute. We talk about candidate keys. Candidate keys are essentially unique identifiers that are not being used as the primary key. The primary key is a candidate key, but it's been identified as the primary key. So the other keys that are unique in the table are left as candidate keys. We've spoken about that in previous videos. So if you're not a primary key and you're not a candidate key, then you are left as a non-key field, and each non-key field attribute is functionally dependent on every candidate key. What does that mean? Let's take a look at an example. So here, let's say this is an invoice, right? And this is an ugly entity, first of all. We certainly don't like this entity. This is not something that would show up, or a relation. This is not a good relation. It's way too complex. We've got too many keys in here, trying to keep track of too much information. Obviously, we've got order information, we've got customer information, we've got product information, all of which really should be broken out into other relations. So again, project-wise, your project isn't going to have any entities that look like this because we followed a very good technique for designing the database. But that being said, here we are, and this would be an example of an entity relation that needs to be normalized. So how do we do that? We have to identify functional dependencies. So if we look at this, and you can kind of, follow the lines around, we've got an order ID. And when they talk about a functional dependency diagram, this is what you see kind of down at the bottom. So you have order ID, and then that bolded arrow that points to the right. That basically says determines. Right, so the determinant in this case is order ID, determines the order date, the customer ID, the customer name, the customer address. Okay, so that's where you get that line that goes from order ID, partial dependencies, goes to order date, customer ID, customer name, customer address. Why? Previously we said that an order needs to be made by one and only one customer. Right, so if that's the case, if I know the order ID, I also know the customer ID. Right, so in that case, you can say that the order ID functionally determines the order date and the rest of the customer information. The customer ID is the determinant and functionally determines the customer name and the customer address. So we're already in a situation where this is not normalized because we have multiple keys determining other values. Okay, so transitive dependencies is what you see between order ID and customer name and customer address. And again, according to the text, a transitive dependency is a functional dependency between the primary key, in this case the order ID, and one or more non-key attributes that are also dependent on another non-key attribute. So order ID will tell you the customer name and customer address, but so will customer ID. If I know the customer ID, then I also know the customer name and the customer address. So that's why order ID is also known as also has a transitive dependency. Transitively determines customer name and customer address. So far so good? I hope so. Then we have another key column in this relation called product ID, and product ID functionally determines product description, product finish, product standard price, right? Then, right, we can have compound keys, right? So if I take the order ID, and again, this is the full dependency that you see up on, which is the top blue line. When I combine order ID and product ID as a key, the two of those functionally determine the order quantity, or in this case it says ordered quantity in the relation. You get the idea. So that in and of itself is will tell us, because of all these different functional dependencies, that tells us that we have to normalize this relation. So that is the end of my video lecture on functional dependencies and keys. Again, if you have questions, and I understand this is a tough subject to just take out of the textbook, if you have any questions, send me an email and I'll try to clarify it, or I'll make another video.